The blood trail led Nash Rollins deeper into the canyon than any deer should have wandered. And when he found her instead, crumpled beneath the cottonwood with an arrow buried in her shoulder, he understood that some trails were never meant for hunting at all. The morning had begun with frost thick enough to crack under his boots and a sky so clear it hurt to look at. Nash had left the ranch before dawn with his rifle across his shoulders and venison on his mind. Thanksgiving was 3 days off, and his mother had made it plain as Sunday that she expected meat on the table. Not excuses, the herd could wait, the fences could wait. But family tradition was something you honored or you answered for it later. He had tracked the buck for 2 hours through red rock country where the juniper grew twisted and low. The animal was smart, doubling back twice, using the stone to hide its prints. But Nash knew this land the way some men knew scripture. He had grown up in these canyons, learned to read sign before he learned to read words. And the buck was good, but it was not good enough. Then the trail changed. The hoofprints became erratic, panicked, veering sharply east toward the narrow draw where the cottonwoods clustered near seasonal water. Nash slowed, instinct prickling at the back of his neck. Something had spooked the deer. Something bigger than him. That was when he saw the blood. Not deer blood, human blood, dark and already drying in the cold air. Splattered across pale stone in a pattern that spoke of violence and flight. Nash's hand moved to his rifle without thought, every sense sharpening as he followed the stain deeper into the trees. She was half hidden in the shadows, her back pressed against the cottonwood trunk. One hand clutched over her shoulder where the arrow shaft jutted obscenely through buckskin and flesh. Her breathing came in shallow, broken gasps, each one costing her more than the last. Dark hair fell loose around her face, tangled with dust and blood. Her eyes were closed, but her jaw was set hard, locked against the pain. Nash stopped 10 feet away, his throat tight. He had seen wounded animals before, seen men hurt bad in ranch accidents. But this was different. She was young, maybe 19 or 20. And she was alone in country that did not forgive mistakes. The arrow was Navajo. He knew the fletching, the careful binding. This was not a white man's doing. He scanned the canyon walls, the shadows between the rocks, looking for whoever had done this. Looking for a reason. There was nothing, no movement. No sound except the rasp of her breathing and the wind moving through dead leaves overhead. Nash stepped closer, boots crunching on gravel. Her eyes snapped open at once, wide and dark and full of terror. She tried to push herself upright, tried to drag herself backward. But the arrow shifted and she cried out, a sharp, broken sound that tore through the silence like something sacred being ripped apart. He froze, hands rising slowly. Palms open, easy, he said, his voice low and steady. I am not here to hurt you. She stared at him, chest heaving, pain and fear warring in her expression. Her lips moved, forming words he could not hear. Then she shook her head violently, tears breaking free and streaking down her dusty cheeks. Stay back, she managed, her English clear but strained. Do not come closer. Nash did not move. He kept his hands where she could see them. Kept his voice calm. You are hurt bad, he said. That arrow needs to come out or you will not last the day. Her hand tightened over the wound, blood seeping between her fingers. I know, she whispered. But her eyes never left him, measuring, judging, trying to decide if he was another danger or the only chance she had left. My name is Nash, he said, Nash Rollins. I have a ranch north of here. I was hunting when I found you. I do not know who did this, but I swear I am not part of it. She studied him for a long moment, her breathing ragged. Then her gaze dropped to the rifle still slung across his back. If you mean to finish it, she said hoarsely, do it quickly. The words hit him like a fist to the chest. No, he said sharply, stepping forward despite her flinch. I mean to help you, if you will let me, Shima. She said after a pause, her voice barely above a whisper. My name is Shima, Nash nodded slowly. Shima, he repeated, testing the name, giving it weight. All right, Shima, I need to see that wound. I need to know how deep it goes before I can do anything. She hesitated, then her shoulders sagged slightly. The fight draining out of her as exhaustion and blood loss began to win. Go slow, she said, and there was something in her voice. Not a plea but a command. A line drawn that he would cross at his own peril. I will, Nash promised, and he meant it. He knelt beside her. Moving with exaggerated care, every motion deliberate and visible. He unslung his rifle and set it on the ground several feet away. Then pulled his knife from his belt and laid it beside the gun. No weapons, he said, just my hands. Shima watched him, her jaw still clenched. But she did not pull away when he leaned closer. The arrow had entered just below her collarbone. Angling downward, the shaft was lodged deep. The fletching pressed against torn buckskin. Blood had soaked through the leather, dark and spreading. Nash swallowed hard. This is going to hurt, he said quietly, but if I do not take it out, the wound will fester, I know, she said again. And this time there was resignation in her voice. Something that made Nash wonder how many times she had faced pain alone and survived it. He cut away the buckskin carefully, exposing the wound. Shima hissed through her teeth, but did not cry out. Her hand found a root beside her and gripped it tight. Knuckles white, Nash could see the tremor running through her body. The way she fought to stay conscious. To stay present. I am going to pull it straight back. He said on 3-1, he pulled. The arrow came free with a wet, sickening sound. And Shima screamed, her back arched, her whole body convulsing with the shock of it. Tears poured down her face and she sobbed once, raw and unguarded. Before biting down hard on her lip to stop the sound, Nash threw the arrow aside and pressed his bandana against the wound. Applying pressure as blood welled hot and fast, Shima gasped, her breathing chaotic. But she did not push him away. Her eyes were wide, glassy with pain, but still focused on him, still aware. You are doing good, Nash said, his own hands shaking now. You are strong. Just stay with me. She nodded weakly, unable to speak. Her hand released the root and found his wrist instead, gripping it with surprising strength, as if anchoring herself to something solid in a world that had gone sideways. The bleeding slowed after what felt like an hour but was probably only minutes. Nash packed the wound with clean cloth torn from his shirt. Binding it tight, his hands were covered in her blood. His shirt ruined, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the faint rise and fall of her chest, the fact that she was still breathing. When it was done, he sat back on his heels, exhausted. Shima's eyes had closed again, but her hand still rested on his wrist. Loose now but not letting go. Can you walk? Nash asked gently. She opened her eyes, looked at him. Then down at her own body as if assessing damage. No, she said simply. Then I will carry you. Nash said, my ranch is not far. You need a real bed, clean water. Someone who knows more about healing than I do. Shima's eyes filled with fresh tears. Not from pain this time, but from something else, something closer to disbelief. Why? She asked, her voice breaking. You do not know me. Nash met her gaze and did not look away, because leaving you here would be wrong. He said, and I was raised better than that. Silence stretched between them, fragile and heavy. Then Shima closed her eyes and gave the smallest nod. All right, she whispered, but go slow. Nash smiled faintly despite everything. I will. He gathered her carefully. One arm beneath her knees, the other supporting her back. She was lighter than he expected. All bone and sinew and stubbornness when he lifted her. She gasped and her hand fisted in his shirt. But she did not cry out again. Her head rolled against his shoulder. Dark hair spilling across his chest, and for a moment Nash felt the full weight of what he had chosen. Not just the physical burden, but the responsibility, the promise. The walk back was slow. each step deliberate, measured to avoid jostling her. The sun climbed higher, warming the air but doing nothing to ease the cold knot in Nash's gut. He did not know who had shot her, did not know if they were still out there watching. He only knew that he was carrying a wounded Navajo girl through country where tensions ran deep and trust was a currency few could afford. Shima drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes her eyes would open and she would look at him, studying his face as if trying to memorize it. Other times she would murmur words in her own language, soft and rhythmic, like a prayer or a song. Nash did not understand the words, but he understood the need behind them. The way people talk to themselves when they are afraid of disappearing, when the ranch finally came into view. Low adobe buildings clustered against the hillside with smoke rising from the chimney. Nash felt relief so sharp it nearly brought him to his knees. He adjusted his grip on Shima and kept walking. Boots crunching on the dirt road that led home, his mother saw them first. Catherine Rollins stepped onto the porch with a basket of laundry and froze. Her eyes went wide, darting from Nash's blood-stained clothes to the girl in his arms. Then back to his face. For a moment, Nash thought she might turn away, might close the door and refuse what he was bringing into her house. Then Catherine set the basket down and hurried forward, her face settling into the calm, determined expression Nash knew better than his own reflection. "Bring her inside," she said, her voice steady and sure. "Quickly now." Nash carried Shima through the door into warmth and lamplight. The house smelled like bread and coffee and the dry sage his mother kept bundled above the hearth. He laid Shima on the long wooden table his father had built 20 years ago, the same table where they ate every meal, where they had celebrated and mourned and made every important decision. Catherine was already moving, gathering clean cloth and water, her hands quick and efficient. "What happened?" she asked without looking up. "I found her in the canyon," Nash said, arrow in her shoulder. "I pulled it out and bound it best I could. But she needs more than I know how to give." Catherine leaned over Shima, checking the wound, her expression unreadable. The girl's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "Where am I?" Shima whispered. "You are safe," Catherine said firmly. And there was something in her voice that brooked no argument. "No doubt, you are in my home and you will be cared for." Shima's gaze found Nash across the room. He nodded once and she closed her eyes again, surrendering to exhaustion and pain and the faint, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, she had been found by the right person after all. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of winter and the distant promise of snow. Inside, the fire burned steady, and Nash stood with his mother beside a wounded girl whose name he had learned only an hour ago, and whose presence had already changed everything. The first night tested them all in different ways. Shima burned with fever by sundown, her skin hot to the touch, her breathing shallow and uneven. Catherine worked through the darkness, changing bandages, forcing water between cracked lips, her hands steady even when exhaustion threatened to pull her under. Nash stayed close, feeding the fire, boiling water, doing whatever his mother asked without question or complaint. He had moved Shima to his own room, the small space off the kitchen where he usually slept alone. It was the warmest room in the house, closest to the hearth. And Catherine had insisted without room for argument. Nash did not protest. He took his bedroll to the main room and tried to sleep on the floor near the fire. But sleep would not come. Every sound from the other room pulled him awake. Every gasp, every murmur, every shift of weight on the bed frame. He listened to his mother's low voice, speaking words of comfort he could not quite hear. Listened to Shima's fevered responses in a language he did not understand, and felt the weight of responsibility settle deeper into his bones. When dawn finally broke pale and cold through the windows, Nash rose stiff and unrested. His father would have been back from the winter pasture by now if he were still alive. Would have known what to do, what to say, how to manage the storm that was surely coming. But his father had been gone 3 years, killed when his horse fell during a spring roundup. And Nash had learned the hard way that some decisions fell to you whether you were ready or not. Catherine emerged from the room looking drawn but determined. "She is through the worst of it," she said quietly. "The fever broke an hour ago. She will live." Relief crashed through Nash, so suddenly he had to sit down. "Thank you," he managed. "Do not thank me yet," Catherine replied, her eyes sharp despite her exhaustion. "Someone shot that girl and left her to die. When she is strong enough to talk. We need to know who and why." Nash nodded, already thinking through the possibilities. None of them good. Navajo territory was northeast of here. Days of travel across hard country, if Shima had come this far alone. She had been running from something, and whatever it was, might still be looking for her. His mother read his expression with the ease of long practice. "We will deal with that when it comes." She said, "Right now, she needs rest and food. And you need to stop looking like you are carrying the sins of the whole territory." Nash almost smiled. "Yes, ma'am." Over the next 3 days, Shima healed in increments. Small victories measured in moments, the first time she sat up without help. Catherine brought her broth and watched with quiet approval as she drank it all. The first time she stood, leaning heavily on Nash's arm. She made it 5 steps before her legs gave out. But those 5 steps mattered more than a mile would have a week before. Nash found himself drawn to the room more often than necessity required. He told himself it was concern, responsibility, the need to make sure she had everything she needed. But the truth was more complicated than that. There was something about the way Shima watched the world. Cautious but curious, guarded but not broken. That made him want to understand her. She spoke little at first, answering questions with single words or nods, conserving her strength. But on the 4th day, when Nash brought her fresh water and found her sitting up in bed, staring out the small window at the mountains beyond, she finally broke the silence. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked without looking at him. Nash set the water down on the table beside the bed. "Because you needed help. Men do not help for no reason," Shima said, turning to face him. Her eyes were clear now, sharp with intelligence and suspicion. "What do you want from me?" The question hung between them, blunt and unavoidable. Nash considered lying, considered offering some easy answer that would smooth things over. But something in her gaze told him she would see through it immediately. "I do not want anything," he said finally. "I found you bleeding and alone. And leaving you there would have made me someone I do not want to be. That is all." Shima studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly, as if accepting the answer but not quite believing it. "Your mother," she said, changing direction. "She does not trust me." Nash almost laughed. "She does not trust anyone at first." "Give her time," Shima repeated softly, as if the word were foreign. "I do not know how much of that I have." "What do you mean?" She looked back toward the window, her expression tightening. "I ran," she said quietly. "From my village, from my family. From a marriage I did not choose. The arrow was a warning. Not meant to kill, just to stop me." Nash felt something cold settle in his chest. "Your own people did this?" "My brother," Shima said, her voice flat. "He was ordered to bring me back. When I would not go, he tried to wound me, to slow me down so others could catch up. But I kept running, and he missed his mark." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Nash understood now why she had been so terrified when he found her. Why she had begged him to stay back. She had been running from men who claimed to care for her. And he was just another man with weapons and strength she could not match. "Are they still looking for you?" Nash asked. Shima's jaw tightened. "Yes." "Then we need to be ready." She turned to him sharply. "We?" "There is no we, rancher. This is my burden, not yours." "You are under my roof," Nash said firmly. "That makes it mine too." Shima shook her head. frustration flashing across her face. You do not understand what you are offering. My family will not stop. They will come here. They will demand I return, and if you stand between us, they will go through you. Let them try, Nash said, and was surprised by how much he meant it. Something shifted in Shima's expression then, the suspicion easing just slightly, replaced by something that might have been the beginning of trust. You are either very brave or very foolish, she said. Probably both, Nash admitted. But that does not change anything. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Catherine continued to check Shima's wound twice daily, applying poultices made from yarrow and sage. Watching for any sign of infection, Nash brought meals, fresh water, extra blankets when the nights turned colder. He spoke to her about the ranch, about the land, about nothing and everything, filling the silence because it seemed important not to let her feel alone. Shima began to move around the house more, testing her strength. Her shoulder was still stiff and painful, but the wound was closing clean. One afternoon, Nash found her in the main room, standing before the hearth and studying the brands burned into the wooden mantel. Marks his father had carved to record each successful season. What do these mean? She asked when she noticed him watching. Each one represents a year, Nash explained. A good year. When the herd grew and we did not lose too much to winter or wolves. Shima traced one of the marks with her finger. Your father made these? Yes. Yes, where is he now? Dead, Nash said simply, 3 years gone. Shima turned to look at him, and for the first time, he saw something soft in her eyes, something like understanding. I am sorry, so am I. She looked back at the brands. We have something similar, she said. Stories carved into stone, into cliff faces, so that those who come after will remember. What do your stories say? Nash asked. Shima smiled faintly. That we are still here, that we survived. That seems like a good story. It is the only one that matters. Later that evening, after Catherine had gone to bed, Nash sat by the fire whittling a piece of cedar. The knife moved in steady, practiced strokes, shaving away thin curls that fell to the floor like snow. Shima emerged from the bedroom wrapped in a blanket, moving slowly but without help. She lowered herself into the chair across from him and watched the firelight play across the walls. Can I ask you something? She said after a while. Nash looked up. Of course. Why do you live out here? So far from towns, from other people. He considered the question, the knife pausing mid-stroke. Because the land does not lie, he said finally. It does not pretend to be something it is not. It is hard and honest. And I understand that better than I understand most people. Shima nodded thoughtfully. My people say the land speaks, but only to those who listen. What does it say to you? Nash asked. She was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. It says I was right to run, she said softly. That freedom is worth the cost, even when the cost is everything. Nash felt the truth of those words settle deep, heavier than any agreement he had ever made. He wanted to tell her she was safe here, that she could stay as long as she needed. But he knew better than to make promises he might not be able to keep. Instead, he handed her the piece of cedar he had been working on. It was rough still, unfinished, but the shape was emerging. A small bird with wings spread wide. Shima took it carefully, turning it over in her hands. What is this? I do not know yet, Nash admitted. I will know when it is finished. She looked at him then, really looked at him. And something passed between them. Unspoken but understood. Thank you, she said quietly. For everything, Nash nodded, his throat suddenly tight. You do not have to thank me. Yes, she said, I do. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks up the chimney, outside. The wind moved through the canyon with a sound like distant voices, and inside, 2 people who had been strangers a week ago sat together in the warmth, bound by choices neither of them fully understood yet, but both had decided were worth making on the 8th day. Shima walked outside for the first time. Nash stayed close but did not hover, letting her move at her own pace. She stood in the yard and turned her face toward the sun. Eyes closed, breathing deep. When she opened them again, she looked stronger, more herself. "I need to start pulling my weight," she said. "I cannot stay here as a guest forever." "You are recovering," Nash said. "There is no rush." "There is always a rush," Shima replied, her tone firm. "If I am going to stay, I need to be useful." Catherine, who had been hanging laundry nearby, spoke up without turning around. "Can you cook?" "Yes." "Can you mend?" "Yes." "Then you can start there," Catherine said, and there was approval in her voice, something that sounded almost like welcome. That afternoon, Shima sat at the kitchen table with a pile of torn shirts and worn socks. Needle and thread moving with practiced ease, Nash worked outside, repairing a section of fence that had come loose in the wind. But his attention kept drifting back toward the house, toward the window where he could see her silhouette bent over her work. When he came inside at dusk, the smell of cooking meat and herbs filled the room. Shima stood at the stove, stirring a pot with careful concentration. Catherine sat nearby, watching with the critical eye of someone who took food seriously. "She is better than you," Catherine said to Nash without preamble. "I know," Nash replied, and found himself smiling. They ate together that night, the three of them around the same table where Shima had first been laid bleeding and unconscious. The meal was simple but good, and the conversation came easier than it had before. Catherine asked questions about Navajo cooking, about herbs and preparation, and Shima answered willingly, her voice growing stronger with each exchange. When the plates were cleared and the lamps burned low, Nash walked Shima back to the bedroom. She paused in the doorway and looked back at him. "Tomorrow," she said, "I want you to teach me something." "What?" Nash asked. "How to shoot that rifle of yours." She said, "If they come for me, I want to be ready." Nash felt pride and fear twist together in his chest. "All right," he said, "we will start in the morning." Shima nodded and closed the door, leaving Nash standing alone in the hallway. He stood there for a long moment, listening to the sound of her moving around inside, then turned and walked back to his bedroll by the fire. Sleep came easier that night, and when he dreamed, it was not of blood or arrows or danger, but of a small wooden bird learning to fly. The morning came sharp and clear, frost glittering on every surface like crushed glass. Nash found Shima already awake and dressed, standing on the porch with her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. She had braided her hair back tight, and there was something different in the way she held herself now. Not weaker from the injury, but harder, more resolved. "You ready?" Nash asked, stepping out beside her with the rifle in hand. "I have been ready since dawn," Shima replied, her breath misting in the cold air. They walked beyond the barn to where the land opened up. A flat stretch of hard-packed earth, backed by a natural berm that would catch stray shots. Nash had set up targets earlier, old fence posts driven into the ground at varying distances, each one marked with a strip of white cloth so they would stand out against the brown landscape. He showed her the rifle first, how to hold it, how to sight down the barrel. His hands guided hers into position, adjusting her grip, her stance. Shima was stiff at first, uncomfortable with the weight and mechanics of it. But she listened carefully to every instruction, her focus absolute. The first shot kicked hard against her injured shoulder. She gasped and nearly dropped the rifle, pain flashing across her face. Nash caught the weapon before it could fall and steadied her with his other hand. "Too much," he said. "We should stop." "No," Shima said through gritted teeth. "Again, your shoulder cannot take it." "Then teach me another way," she insisted, her eyes fierce despite the tears gathering at the corners. "There has to be another way." Nash studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, come here." He positioned her differently this time, showing her how to brace the stock against her good shoulder instead. how to compensate for the angle. It was awkward and unconventional, but when she fired again, the recoil distributed differently. She stayed upright this time, and though her face was tight with discomfort, she did not cry out. "Better," Nash said. Again, Shima repeated. They spent 2 hours in the cold. Nash patient and methodical. Shima determined to the point of stubbornness. By the end of it, she could hit the nearest target 3 times out of 5. Not perfect, but enough to matter. When they finally stopped, her hands were shaking from exertion and cold.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
But there was satisfaction in her expression. "I will practice every day," she said, "until I do not miss." "That is a good goal," Nash replied. Walking back toward the house, Shima fell into step beside him. Slower than his natural pace, but keeping up. She was quiet for several steps, then spoke without looking at him. "When I was a child," she said, "my father taught me to track, to read the land, to survive without help." He said a woman who could not protect herself was already dead. "Sounds like a hard man," Nash observed. He was, Shima agreed, but he was not wrong. When they reached the house, Catherine had coffee waiting and a pot of something savory simmering on the stove. She took one look at Shima's pale face and pointed toward the table. "Sit before you fall," she ordered. Shima obeyed without argument, lowering herself carefully into the chair. Catherine poured coffee and set the cup in front of her, then did the same for Nash. "Neither of you have the sense God gave a mule," she muttered, but there was no real anger in it. "She did well," Nash said. "Of course she did," Catherine replied. "Now eat something before you both collapse." The afternoon brought unexpected visitors. Nash was in the barn checking on the horses when he heard the sound of hooves approaching fast. He stepped outside and saw 2 riders cresting the ridge, moving with purpose toward the ranch. His hand went instinctively to the revolver on his hip as he walked out to meet them. The men who dismounted were rough-looking, weathered by sun and hard living. One was older, gray-bearded and thick through the chest. The other was younger, lean and dangerous. With eyes that missed nothing, they both wore firearms openly. "And neither bothered with pleasantries, you Rollins?" the older man asked. "I am," Nash replied, keeping his voice neutral. "What can I do for you?" "We are looking for someone," the younger man said. "A Navajo girl, dark hair, about this tall." He gestured with his hand. "Shot and wounded about 10 days back. You seen anyone like that?" Nash felt his pulse quicken, but kept his expression flat. "Why are you looking for her?" "Family business," the older man said. "She ran off, needs to come home." "Does not sound like she wants to go home," Nash observed. The younger man stepped closer, his hand resting casually on the butt of his pistol. "What she wants does not matter," he said coldly. "She belongs to someone. And we aim to bring her back." "Belongs," Nash repeated, the word tasting bitter. "She is not property." The older man spat into the dirt. "You do not understand Navajo ways." "White man, she was promised. The marriage was agreed. Running does not change that." "Seems to me it changes everything," Nash said. The younger man's eyes narrowed. "You hiding her here?" "I am telling you to get off my land," Nash replied, his voice dropping to something colder and more final. Now, the 2 men exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. The older one nodded slowly. "All right," he said, "we will go, but you should know. Her brother is not far behind us, and he is not as patient as we are." "I will keep that in mind," Nash said. They mounted up and rode off without another word. But Nash knew they would be back, or someone like them would. He stood watching until they disappeared over the ridge, then turned and walked quickly back to the house. Inside, Shima was standing by the window, her face pale. "I saw them," she said quietly. Nash nodded. "They are looking for you." "I know." Shima's hands twisted together. "I should leave. I am bringing danger to your home." You are not going anywhere, Nash said firmly. You do not understand, Shima insisted, her voice rising. My brother, the one who shot me, he will come. And he will not leave without me or without blood. Then we will be ready, Nash said. Catherine appeared from the kitchen, her expression grave. How many are we expecting? I do not know, Shima admitted. At least 3, maybe more, Catherine nodded once, then moved with sudden purpose toward the back of the house. She returned moments later carrying an old shotgun and a box of shells. I have not fired this in years, she said, but I remember how. Nash stared at his mother. Ma, you do not have to. This is my home too. Catherine interrupted. And I will defend it. Now stop arguing and start planning. The rest of the day was spent in preparation. Nash checked every window, every door, made sure the rifle was loaded and the revolver clean. Catherine moved through the house with quiet efficiency, gathering supplies, securing anything that could be used as cover. Shima watched it all with growing dread, guilt written plainly across her face that evening. As the sun dropped toward the horizon and shadows stretched long across the yard, Nash found Shima sitting on the porch steps, her shoulders hunched. He sat down beside her without asking permission. You are thinking about running? He said. Yes, she admitted. Do not, Nash said simply. Why? Shima turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Why do you care so much? I am nothing to you, just a burden you found bleeding in the canyon. Nash was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. When I found you, he said finally, I made a choice. I could have walked away. Told myself it was not my problem, but I did not. And I am not going to start walking away now. That is not an answer, Shima said. Yes it is, Nash replied. You just do not like it. She almost smiled at that, then sobered. If they come, if they take me, I want you to let me go. Do not fight for me. Do not throw your life away. Not going to happen, Nash said. Shima's jaw tightened. You are the most stubborn man I have ever met. I have been told that before, Nash said. And this time he did smile. Come on, Ma is making supper. And you should eat. They stood together. And as they turned toward the door, Shima's hand brushed against his, neither pulling away. Just that brief contact, warm and solid. A promise neither of them had words for yet. Inside, the house was bright with lamplight, the smell of food and coffee filling the rooms. They sat together at the table, the 3 of them, and for a while, they did not talk about danger or blood or the men who would come. They talked about nothing and everything, about recipes and weather and stories from years past. Ordinary things that felt precious precisely because they were ordinary. When the meal was finished and the dishes cleared, Catherine excused herself to bed. She paused at the doorway and looked back at Nash and Shima, still sitting across from each other at the table. Whatever happens, she said quietly, we face it together. Yes, ma'am, Nash said. After she left, the silence between Nash and Shima felt different, heavier with things unspoken. Finally, Shima broke it. Tell me about your father, she said. Nash leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking. He was a good man, he said, hard but fair. He believed in keeping your word, in working until the job was done, in protecting what mattered. You are like him, Shima observed. I try to be, Nash admitted, though I do not always succeed. None of us do, Shima said. My father, he wanted me to marry a man twice my age, a man with wealth and influence. He said it was for the good of the family, for alliances and stability. But he never asked what I wanted. What do you want? Nash asked. Shima met his eyes, the lamplight reflecting in hers. I want to choose, she said simply. I want my life to be mine. Not something traded away for politics or pride. That seems fair, Nash said. The world does not care about fair, Shima replied. Maybe not, Nash agreed, but we can. She studied him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. You really believe that, do not you? I have to, Nash said. Otherwise, what is the point of any of it? Shima reached across the table then, her hand covering his. It was the first time she had touched him deliberately. With intent rather than necessity, Nash felt the warmth of her palm. The calluses earned through work and survival. And knew without doubt that he would fight for her. Would bleed for her if it came to that. Thank you, Shima said softly. For giving me a choice, always, Nash promised. They sat like that for a while longer. Hands joined across the table, the night deepening outside. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring. But tonight, in this moment, they had peace in each other. And that was enough later, as Nash lay on his bedroll by the fire. He heard Shima moving quietly in the next room. He knew she was not sleeping. Knew she was probably standing by the window, watching the darkness for movement. For danger, he wanted to go to her, to tell her it would be all right. But he did not know if that was true, so he stayed where he was and kept his own watch. Rifle close at hand, waiting for dawn. They came with the morning fog. Silent shapes materializing from the gray like ghosts given form. Nash saw them first from the barn where he had been since before dawn. Unable to sleep, unable to stop counting the hours until this moment arrived. 5 riders moved in a loose formation across the valley floor, deliberate and unhurried. Confident in their purpose, he ran for the house. Boots pounding across frozen ground, Shima met him at the door. Already dressed, already knowing. Her face was pale but composed, the fear there but controlled. Locked down beneath layers of will, how many? She asked 5, Nash said. Breathing hard, maybe 10 minutes out. Catherine emerged from her room fully clothed. The shotgun cradled in her arms like she had been born holding it. She moved to the window and pulled the curtain aside just enough to see. Her lips pressed into a thin line positions, she said. Her voice carrying the weight of command. Nash, you take the front window. I will cover the side, Shima. You stay low and away from the glass. No, Shima said firmly. I will not hide while you fight for me. Catherine turned, her eyes hard. You will do as I say, with respect, Shima replied, meeting that gaze without flinching. This is my fight. I will stand in it. For a moment. The 2 women stared at each other, something passing between them that Nash did not fully understand. Then Catherine gave a sharp nod. Fine. But you stay behind cover and you do not take risks. Understood? Understood, Shima agreed. Nash handed her the revolver from his belt. 6 shots, he said. Make them count. She checked the cylinder with practiced ease. Then took up position near the far window where the angle gave her cover, but still allowed a clear view of the approaching riders. Nash moved to the front, rifle already loaded and ready. His hands were steady, his breathing controlled. But his heart hammered against his ribs like something trying to escape. The rider stopped 50 yards out, just beyond effective rifle range. Close enough to be seen clearly, but far enough to make the first shot difficult. They sat their horses in a line, waiting, and Nash knew they were making a point. Showing they had all the time in the world, one rider moved forward alone. The horse walked slowly, each step measured. When he was close enough for his features to be clear, Nash felt Shima stiffen beside her window. She knows him, Nash realized. And the knowledge sat cold in his gut. The man was young, maybe 30. With hard eyes and a mouth set in a line that suggested he had forgotten how to smile. He wore traditional Navajo clothing mixed with white man's gear, a rifle across his lap. A knife visible at his belt when he spoke. His voice carried easily across the cold morning air. Shima, he called, I know you are in there. She did not answer, her knuckles white around the revolver grip. The man continued, his tone almost conversational. You have caused much trouble. Sister, father is angry, the elders are angry. Your betrothed is angry, but I am here to bring you home. And if you come now, without more fighting, It will go easier for you. Nash glanced at Shima, saw the way her jaw clenched, the rapid rise and fall of her chest. He wanted to speak for her, to tell this man to leave and never come back. But he knew this moment belonged to her alone. Finally, Shima moved. She stood and stepped into view in the window. Still protected by the wall but visible, her brother's expression flickered. Something that might have been relief or anger, impossible to tell. I am not coming back. Tarek, Shima said, her voice clear and unwavering. I will not marry a man I do not choose. I will not live a life decided by others. Tarek's face hardened. You do not have a choice, he said. The agreement was made, the bride price paid. You belong to him now whether you accept it or not. I belong to no one, Shima shouted, and Nash heard the fury in her voice. The years of it compressed into those 4 words. Tarek shifted in his saddle, his hand moving toward his rifle. Then you forced me to take you by force, he said, and I will. Do not think these white people can protect you. They are nothing, and when this is over, they will be less than nothing. Nash stepped into view then. Rifle raised and aimed directly at Tarek's chest. You will leave, he said, his voice carrying the same cold finality his father had used when drawing lines that could not be crossed. You will turn around, ride back the way you came, and you will not return. Tarek laughed, a sound without humor. And if I do not? Then you will die here, Nash said simply. The other 4 riders tensed, hands moving toward weapons, the moment stretched taut, balanced on the edge of violence. Tarek studied Nash with the calculating gaze of a man weighing odds. You would kill for her? Tarek asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. A woman you do not even know? I know enough, Nash replied. Tarek shook his head slowly. You are a fool, white man. You throw your life away for nothing. She will never be yours. Her heart belongs to her people, to her blood. One day she will wake up and realize she chose wrong, and then what will you have? Nothing but regret and a wasted life. The words hit Nash like fists. Not because they were cruel, but because part of him feared they might be true. He did not know what tomorrow held, did not know if Shima would stay or leave, did not know if what was growing between them could survive outside of crisis and necessity. But he knew what he believed, and he knew what he would fight for. Maybe you are right, Nash said. Maybe I am a fool. But I would rather be a fool who stood for something than a man who dragged his sister back in chains because he was too afraid to question orders. Tarek's expression went cold. Murderous behind Nash, Shima spoke again. Her voice softer but no less firm. Tarek, she said, please. You were my brother before you were their weapon. Do you remember? When we were children, you taught me to ride, to shoot, to be strong. You said I should never let anyone break me, and now you come to break me yourself. Something flickered across Tarek's face. Pain maybe, or memory, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Those days are over, he said. We are not children anymore. No, Shima agreed, we are not. I am a woman now, and I make my own choices. If you cannot respect that, then you were never truly my brother at all. The silence that followed felt fragile. Like glass under pressure, Tarek sat motionless on his horse, his jaw working. Then he raised his hand in a signal, and the 4 riders behind him spread out. Flanking movement, preparing to advance. Catherine fired first. The shotgun blast tore through the morning. Buckshot kicking up dirt 10 feet in front of the nearest rider's horse. The animal reared, screaming, and the rider fought to control it. Catherine racked another shell with a sound like breaking bones. The next person who moves dies, she called out. And there was zero doubt in her voice, zero hesitation. The riders froze. Nash kept his rifle trained on Tarek, who had not moved, had not even flinched at the gunfire. The 2 men stared at each other across 50 yards of frozen ground. And Nash understood that what happened next would determine everything. Tarek finally spoke, his voice flat. You cannot watch her forever, he said. Eventually you will sleep. You will turn your back, you will make a mistake. And when you do, I will be there. Then I guess I will not make mistakes, Nash replied. Torak's lips pulled back in something that was not quite a smile. We will see, he said. Then to Shima, this is not over. Sister, I will return, and next time I will not ask. He wheeled his horse around and rode back toward the other riders. They regrouped quickly, still tense, still dangerous. But the moment for violence had passed, at least for now. They turned as one and rode back the way they had come, disappearing into the fog that had brought them. Nash did not lower his rifle until they were completely out of sight. Even then, he kept it ready, his eyes scanning the valley for any sign of movement. Beside him, Catherine finally lowered the shotgun, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. That was too close, she said quietly. Nash nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. He turned and found Shima still standing at her window, the revolver hanging loose in her hand, tears streaming silently down her face. He crossed to her in 3 strides and took the gun gently from her grip. Setting it aside, she looked up at him. Her expression shattered. I am sorry, she whispered. I am so sorry I brought this to you. Do not, Nash said firmly, wrapping his arms around her. Do not apologize for surviving. She collapsed against him then, her body shaking with sobs she had been holding back for weeks. Maybe years. Nash held her, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other pressed flat against her spine. Anchoring her, he felt her tears soak through his shirt, felt the way she clutched at him like he was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid and uncertain. Catherine moved quietly to the door, checking the yard, then back to the windows. She did not speak, did not intrude, just kept watch while her son held a woman who had become more than a stranger, more than a responsibility, something neither of them had words for yet. Eventually Shima's tears slowed. Her breathing evened out. She pulled back slightly, wiping at her face with the heel of her hand. Embarrassed. I am not usually like this, she said. I know, Nash replied. He could have killed you, Shima said, all of you. And it would have been my fault. He did not kill anyone, Catherine said from her position by the window. And that means we won, at least for today. Shima shook her head. He will come back. He meant what he said. Then we will be ready again, Nash said. As many times as it takes. You cannot live like this. Shima insisted, always waiting, always watching. That is not a life. It is the life I choose, Nash said. And he meant it with everything in him. Shima searched his face, looking for doubt, for regret, for any sign that he did not understand what he was committing to. She found none. Why? She asked finally, why would you do this? Nash took a breath, knowing the answer, knowing it had been true since the moment he lifted her from the snow. Because when I look at you, he said quietly, I see someone worth standing beside, someone worth fighting for. And I have spent too much of my life alone to walk away from that now. The words hung between them, honest and raw. Shima's eyes widened, fresh tears gathering, but these were different. Not born of fear or grief, but of something else, something that might have been hope. I do not know what tomorrow looks like, Nash continued. I do not know if your brother will come back, or if we will survive if he does. But I know that right now, in this moment, you are here and you are safe, and that matters more to me than anything else. Shima reached up and touched his face, her palm warm against his cheek. You are a strange man, Nash Rollins, she said. But there was affection in her voice, warmth that had not been there before. I have been told that too, Nash said, and managed a smile. She smiled back, small and fragile but real. Then we are both strange, she said. Because I think I am starting to believe you. Good, Nash said. That is a start. Catherine cleared her throat, drawing their attention. I hate to interrupt, she said dryly, but we should probably figure out what comes next. Because standing around being sentimental is not going to keep us alive. Nash laughed despite everything. You are right, Ma. They spent the rest of the morning planning. Catherine suggested reinforcing the doors, setting up better sight lines, preparing for a siege if it came to that. Shima offered knowledge of Navajo tactics, how her people fought, what they would likely try next. Nash listened to it all, absorbing every detail, turning it over in his mind. By afternoon, they had done what they could. The house felt more like a fortress now, less like a home, but that was the price of safety. Nash walked the perimeter one more time, checking everything, making sure nothing had been overlooked. When he returned inside, he found Shima standing at the stove, cooking despite everything, despite the fear and exhaustion and the knowledge that danger still circled them like wolves around a wounded animal. She looked up when he entered and smiled. "We still have to eat," she said simply, and in that moment, Nash understood something profound. Life continued, even in the shadow of threat. Even when the future was uncertain. You kept moving, kept working, kept finding reasons to go on. That was what survival really meant. Not just staying alive, but staying human. They ate together as the sun descended, casting long shadows across the valley, somewhere out there. Tarek and his men were planning their next move, but here, inside these walls, 3 people shared a meal and found small moments of peace, and that was its own kind of victory. 3 days passed without incident, but the waiting carved its own kind of wound. Nash rode the property line each morning, eyes sharp for any sign of movement, any disturbance in the frost or fresh tracks crossing the boundaries he had marked. He found nothing, which somehow made the tension worse. The silence felt like a held breath, like the moment before lightning strikes. Shima threw herself into work with an intensity that bordered on desperate. She cooked, cleaned, mended every piece of torn fabric in the house, organized supplies that did not need organizing, anything to keep her hands busy, to keep her mind from spinning through all the ways this could end badly. Nash watched her moving through rooms like a woman trying to outrun her own shadow. On the 4th morning, Catherine found Nash in the barn, checking saddles intact for the 3rd time that week. She leaned against the stall door and waited until he acknowledged her presence. "You cannot protect her from everything," she said without preamble. "I know," Nash replied, not looking up from the leather he was inspecting for wear. "Do you?" Catherine pressed. "Because from where I stand, you are trying to build walls high enough to keep out the whole world. And that is not possible, son. Not for her, not for anyone." Nash set down the saddle and finally met his mother's eyes. "What am I supposed to do, Ma? Just accept that one day they will come back and take her? That I will wake up and she will be gone?" Catherine's expression softened. "No," she said gently. "I am saying you need to give her more than fear and vigilance. You need to give her reasons to stay that have nothing to do with protection." The words settled into Nash like seeds in soil. Uncomfortable but necessary. He nodded slowly, understanding even if he did not yet know how to act on it. That afternoon, Nash found Shima sitting on the porch steps, her gaze fixed on the mountains to the east where her homeland lay beyond reach. He sat down beside her without speaking, letting the silence stretch comfortable and easy between them. "Tell me about Thanksgiving," Shima said after a while, her voice soft. "You said it was coming soon. What does it mean?" Nash considered the question. "It is a day for gratitude," he said. "For recognizing what you have instead of mourning what you lost. My father used to say it was about choosing to see the good even when the bad tried to blind you." "That sounds hard," Shima observed. "It is," Nash admitted, "but worth doing anyway." She turned to look at him, curiosity lighting her features. "What are you grateful for this year?" The question caught him off guard, forced him to sit with it, to really think. Finally, he spoke. "I am grateful I went hunting that day," he said quietly. "Grateful I found you." Grateful you trusted me enough to let me help." Shima's eyes glistened, "Even though I brought danger to your home." "Especially because of that," Nash said. "Because it means you thought this place. Thought we were worth the risk." She looked away, swallowing hard. "I did not think," she admitted. "I just ran. And when you found me, I was too weak to keep running."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story.
"So I stayed because I had no choice. And now?" Nash asked. "Now," Shima said slowly, testing the words, "now I stay because I want to. Because for the first time in my life, I am choosing something for myself. And that feels like breathing after being underwater too long." Nash felt something warm and solid settle in his chest. Something that felt like hope taking root. "Then stay," he said, "for as long as you want. For as long as it feels right." "What if it always feels right?" Shima asked, and there was vulnerability in the question. A fear of wanting something she might not be allowed to keep. "Then I guess you are stuck with us," Nash replied. Trying to lighten the weight of the moment, she smiled, small and genuine. "There are worse places to be stuck." That evening, Catherine announced her intentions with the kind of finality that allowed no argument. "We are having a proper Thanksgiving dinner," she declared. "I do not care that the world outside these walls wants to tear itself apart. In this house we will sit down together and remember what matters." Nash and Shima exchanged glances, but neither dared protest when Catherine set her mind to something. The wise choice was to get out of her way and help where permitted. The next day was a flurry of preparation. Catherine pulled out recipes written in her mother's hand. Flour-dusted papers she had carried west in a trunk 20 years ago. She directed Nash to butcher one of the chickens. Sent Shima to gather what herbs still grew near the creek despite the cold. The house filled with the smell of baking bread and roasting meat. With the sounds of chopping and stirring and quiet conversation, Nash found himself smiling as he worked. The simple domestic tasks grounding him in ways he had not expected. He caught Shima laughing at something Catherine said, genuine and unguarded. And the sound struck him as the most beautiful thing he had heard in months. By evening, the table was laden with food that seemed almost obscene given the austerity of recent weeks. Roasted chicken, bread still warm from the oven, potatoes cooked with rosemary, preserved vegetables from the root cellar, even a pie made with dried apples and precious sugar. They sat down together as the sun set, the lamps casting warm light that pushed back the darkness. Catherine said a prayer, her voice steady and sure, thanking God for provisions, for safety, for the people gathered at this table. When she finished, there was a moment of profound quiet, as if the house itself were holding space for gratitude. Then they ate, and it was glorious. The food was simple but prepared with care. And it tasted like home, like permanence, like a promise that tomorrow would come and they would face it together. Conversation flowed easily, stories shared, laughter rising natural and unforced. Shima told them about Thanksgiving in her own culture, the ceremonies of harvest and gratitude that marked the turning of seasons. Catherine listened with genuine interest, asking questions, drawing connections between traditions that seemed different on the surface, but shared the same heart. Nash watched them. These two women who had come into each other's lives through violence and necessity, but had found something real in the aftermath. He thought about his father, about what the old man would have said if he could see this table now. And he knew without doubt that his father would have approved after the meal was cleared. Catherine brought out a bottle of whiskey she had been saving for a special occasion. She poured 3 small glasses and raised hers. "To choices," she said simply. "To choices," Nash and Shima echoed. And they drank later as Catherine retired to her room. Nash and Shima remained at the table, the lamp burning low between them. They had entered that comfortable space where words were optional, where presence itself was communication enough. "I have been thinking," Shima said eventually. Breaking the silence, about what comes next, Nash waited, letting her gather her thoughts. I cannot stay hidden forever, she continued. Eventually, I will have to face my people, my family, not to go back, but to make them understand that this is not them losing me. It is me finding myself. That sounds dangerous, Nash observed. Living is dangerous, Shima replied. Hiding is just slower dying. Do you want me to go with you? Nash asked, already knowing he would regardless of her answer. Shima met his eyes. Yes, she said, but not yet. Not until I am ready, until I know what I want to say. Fair enough, Nash agreed. She reached across the table and took his hand, her fingers threading through his. This, she said softly, whatever this is between us, it is real to me. I need you to know that. Nash's throat tightened. It is real to me too, he managed. They sat like that for a long time, hands joined, the lamp burning down between them, outside the window. The stars wheeled through the sky, indifferent and eternal, but inside, two people held onto each other and the fragile, fierce hope that they might actually have a future together. The following morning brought unexpected visitors of a different kind. Nash was splitting wood behind the house when he heard horses approaching. His hand went immediately to his rifle, but Catherine's voice called out from the porch. It is all right. These are neighbors. Nash came around front to find 3 riders, all of them familiar faces from the scattered ranches and homesteads that dotted this part of the territory. Tom Brennan from the Double B, Sarah Chun, who ran a small trading post, and old Walt Fincher, who had been in these mountains longer than anyone could remember. They dismounted stiffly, the kind of awkward that came from people who wanted to help, but did not know quite how. Tom spoke first, his hat in his hands. We heard there might be trouble heading your way. He said, thought you could use some extra eyes. Nash was stunned. How did you hear? Word travels, Walt said with a shrug, especially when armed men start asking questions at Sarah's trading post. Sarah nodded. They were looking for a Navajo girl. She said, I told them I had not seen anyone, but I knew they would come this direction eventually. We figured you might appreciate some company. Catherine appeared on the porch, Shima half hidden behind her. The 3 visitors took in the scene, made their own conclusions, and not one of them looked judgmental. Just concerned. We would appreciate that. Catherine said firmly, come inside, I will put coffee on. Over the next hour, a plan took shape. The neighbors would take turns riding past the ranch, making their presence known, creating the impression of community vigilance rather than isolated targets. It was not a permanent solution, but it bought time and demonstrated that Nash and his family were not alone. When the visitors finally left, Nash felt something he had not felt in days. A loosening of the knot in his chest, a sense that maybe the walls he was trying to build did not have to be so high after all, because other people were willing to stand on them too. That night, Nash found Shima standing at the window of his room. Looking out at the darkness, he approached slowly. Not wanting to startle her, your neighbors, she said without turning around. They risked themselves for me, a stranger. They risked themselves for what was right. Nash corrected gently, there is a difference, is there? Shima asked, finally looking at him. In my experience, people protect their own and see everyone else as a threat. Not everyone, Nash said. Some people remember that we all bleed the same, that we all want the same basic things. Safety, dignity, the chance to choose our own path. Shima turned fully to face him, her expression open in a way he had rarely seen. I am starting to believe that. She said, because of you, because of your mother, because of people like Tom and Sarah and Walt. You are teaching me that the world might be bigger than the small. Cruel piece of it, I knew. Nash stepped closer, his hand reaching up to cup her cheek. The world is exactly as big as you let it be, he said softly. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. "When I am with you," she whispered, "I feel like I can breathe, like the future is not just something to survive, but something to want." Nash felt his heart hammering, felt the weight and rightness of this moment. "Then stay," he said again. And this time it was not just an offer but a plea. "Stay, and let us build something together. Something that belongs to us." Shima opened her eyes, and in them, Nash saw his own hope reflected back. "Yes," she said, and it was the simplest, most complicated word in the world. He kissed her then, gentle and careful, asking permission with every movement. She kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. And for a few perfect moments, nothing else existed except this connection. This choice they were both making when they finally pulled apart. Both breathing hard, Shima laughed softly. "That was," she paused, searching for words worth waiting for. Nash supplied. "Yes," she agreed, smiling. "Definitely worth waiting for." They stood together in the lamplight, foreheads touching, and Nash knew that whatever came next, whatever battles still needed fighting, they would face them together, and that made all the difference. Winter arrived in earnest 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, bringing snow that transformed the ranch into something both beautiful and isolating. The threats had not materialized again, no riders on the horizon, no messages delivered through intermediaries. But Nash knew better than to mistake absence for resolution. Tarek was out there somewhere, waiting for his moment, choosing his time. The ranch work continued regardless of season or threat. Animals needed tending, fences required constant repair. Firewood had to be split and stacked against the cold that settled into the valley like something with weight and intention. Nash worked from dawn until dusk, his body remembering rhythms his father had taught him. Rhythms that connected him to this land in ways words could never capture. Shima had become part of those rhythms. She moved through the daily tasks with increasing confidence, learning what Catherine taught, adding her own knowledge where it fit. The two women had developed a partnership built on mutual respect and the understanding that survival required cooperation more than agreement. They did not always see eye to eye, but they always worked toward the same goal. One morning, Nash woke to find Shima already dressed and standing by the door with her coat on. "I want to check the traps," she announced when she saw him stirring. Nash sat up, immediately alert. "That is a 2-hour ride." "Minimum, I know," Shima said calmly, "which is why I'm leaving now while there is daylight." "Not alone," Nash said, reaching for his own coat. Shima's jaw set in that stubborn line he had learned to recognize. "I cannot live in fear forever, Nash. I cannot let the possibility of danger keep me trapped inside these walls. If I do that, then Tarek has already won." The logic was sound, but that did not make it easier to accept. Nash looked to his mother, who had emerged from her room at the sound of voices. Catherine met his gaze and gave a small nod. "She is right," his mother said quietly, "and she will not be alone. You will go with her." It was decided then. They prepared quickly, packing supplies and weapons with the kind of efficiency that came from practice. Catherine walked them to the door and placed a hand on each of their shoulders in turn. "Be careful," she said, "and be back before dark." "We will," Nash promised. The ride out was cold but clear, their breath misting in the air as the horses picked their way through snow that had drifted in some places and blown clear in others. Shima rode with easy competence, her body moving naturally with the horse's rhythm. Nash watched her from the corner of his eye, marveling at how much had changed in such a short time. They checked 3 trap lines, finding 2 rabbits and a fox. Shima handled the animals with respect, thanking them quietly in her own language before preparing them for transport. Nash had seen plenty of hunters in his life, but there was something different in the way Shima approached it. A reverence that made the act feel less like taking and more like receiving a gift. On the ride back, with the sun beginning its descent toward the western peaks, Shima spoke suddenly. breaking the comfortable silence they had maintained for the last hour. "I need to tell you something," she said. Nash felt his stomach tighten. "All right," she took a breath. Her hands steady on the reins. "When I ran from my village," she began, "it was not just about refusing the marriage. It was about refusing to be property, to be traded like livestock or land. My father saw me as a tool for building alliances. My betrothed saw me as a prize to be won. Neither of them saw me as a person with my own thoughts and dreams." Nash listened, saying nothing, giving her space to continue. "But here," Shima said, her voice growing stronger, "with you and Catherine, I am just Shima. Not someone's daughter or someone's intended bride, just myself. And that is a gift I did not know I needed until I had it." "You have always been yourself," Nash said gently. "We just recognized it." Shima smiled at that. "Maybe," she allowed. "But recognition matters, being seen matters. And I want you to know that whatever happens, whether Turek comes back or not, whether I have to face my family or not, I am grateful for this time, for this place, for you." The words settled around Nash like snow. Quiet and profound. "I am grateful too," he said. "For all of it." They rode on, the ranch coming into view as the light began to fade. Smoke rose from the chimney, a beacon in the gathering dusk. Nash felt something ease in his chest at the sight. The bone-deep knowledge that he was heading home, and that the definition of home had expanded to include the woman riding beside him. Catherine met them at the barn, relief plain on her face despite her best efforts to hide it. "Good," she said, taking the game from Shima. "I will start preparing these. You two get the horses settled," as they worked in the barn, brushing down the animals and checking their hooves for ice. Nash found himself thinking about the future in concrete terms for the first time. Not the immediate future of threats and defense, but the longer future. The years that might stretch ahead if they were fortunate enough to claim them. "Shima," he said as they finished with the last horse. She looked up, hay in her hair. Her cheeks flushed from cold and work. "Yes? Have you thought about what happens if Turek does not come back? If he decides you are not worth the trouble?" Shima considered the question seriously. "I think he will come back," she said. "His pride demands it, but if he does not, if somehow this becomes permanent, then I suppose I think about building a life here. Learning everything Catherine can teach me, maybe helping with the ranch. Contributing instead of just surviving. Would you be happy with that?" Nash asked, "Because I need you to be honest. Would a life here, in this place, with these people, be enough?" Shima set down the brush she had been holding and crossed to where Nash stood. She took his hands in hers, her grip firm and warm. "I have spent my entire life being told what I should want," she said, "what I should value, what should make me happy. But standing here right now, I can tell you that this," she gestured around them, encompassing the barn, the ranch, the life they were building. "This feels more like home than anything I have ever known." Nash pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, his chin resting on top of her head. "Then we will make it work," he said, "whatever it takes." They stood like that for a long moment, drawing strength from each other. Then Shima pulled back slightly and looked up at him, her expression shifting to something more playful. "But if you expect me to learn to love chicken chores, you are going to be disappointed." Nash laughed, the sound surprising him. "Fair enough," he said. "I will handle the chickens, inside the house." Catherine had already started preparing the game. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency. But she looked up when they entered, and something in her expression made Nash pause. "We need to talk," she said, "all three of us." They gathered at the table, the same table where so many important conversations had happened. Catherine poured coffee and sat down heavily, as if whatever she needed to say carried physical weight. "I have been thinking," she began, "about what it means to build a life in a place like this, about what we owe to each other and to ourselves." She looked at Shima directly, You have become part of this family, whether any of us planned for it or not. And that means we protect you, not just from outside threats, but from the weight of obligation and guilt. I do not understand, Shima said carefully. Catherine leaned forward, her eyes intense. What I mean is this: you do not owe us anything. Not for taking you in, not for the food or shelter or protection. Those things were given freely, and they come with no debt attached. If you choose to stay, it needs to be because you want to, not because you feel trapped by gratitude. Shima's eyes welled with tears, but she did not look away. I know, she said softly. And I choose to stay because this is where I want to be. Catherine nodded, satisfied. Then that is settled. She turned to Nash, and you son, you need to understand something too. Love is not ownership. Choosing to stand beside someone is not the same as claiming them. If you and Shima are going to build something together, it has to be built on equality and respect, not on you being the savior and her being the saved. The words stung, but Nash recognized the truth in them. You are right, he said, and I will do better. I know you will, Catherine replied, her voice softening. You are your father's son. And he understood that strength means knowing when to bend. The conversation shifted then, moving toward practical matters, spring planting schedules, repairs needed before the next winter, the 100 small details that made up a life. But underneath it all ran a current of something deeper, a commitment being forged in real time. A family choosing itself. That night, unable to sleep, Nash found himself standing on the porch looking out at the snow-covered landscape. The moon was bright enough to cast shadows, turning the familiar world into something alien and beautiful. He heard the door open behind him and Shima's footsteps crossing the porch. Could not sleep either? She asked, coming to stand beside him. Too much thinking, Nash admitted. About what? About how strange it is, he said, that a few weeks ago I did not know you existed. And now I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Shima was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. My grandmother used to say that some meetings are written in the stars long before they happen, that we are drawn to the people we need most, even when we do not know we need them. Do you believe that? Nash asked. I did not, Shima said, but I am starting to. They stood together in the cold, shoulders touching, watching the night. Somewhere out there, danger still waited, problems still needed solving. But in this moment, under this moon, they had peace and each other, and that was more than either of them had dared hope for. The weeks turned into months, and still Tarek did not return. The neighbors continued their patrols, the community holding steady in its support. Winter deepened, then began to loosen its grip. The first signs of spring appeared, subtle but undeniable. Buds on the trees, the return of birdsong, the smell of thawing earth. Nash and Shima worked side by side, their partnership growing more natural with each passing day. They learned each other's rhythms, anticipated needs, developed a shorthand that required few words. Catherine watched them with satisfaction, seeing in their relationship the kind of foundation that could weather any storm. One evening in early March, as they sat together after dinner, Catherine made an announcement. I am going to town next week, she said. I need supplies, and I want to establish that Shima is part of this household, that anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me. That could be dangerous, Nash said immediately. Living is dangerous, Catherine replied, echoing Shima's words from months before. And hiding only works for so long. Eventually we have to step into the light and claim our place. Shima looked between them, her expression torn between fear and hope. I will go with you, she said finally. We all will, Nash decided. We face this together. The trip to town took most of a day. They rode in with the sun high. 3 people on 3 horses, projecting confidence they did not entirely feel. The town was small, a handful of buildings clustered around a main street, but it was the center of what passed for civilization in this part of the territory. Eyes followed them as they dismounted. Conversations paused. Nash felt the weight of judgment and curiosity, but he kept his head high and his hand away from his weapon. Catherine walked with the bearing of someone who knew her own worth and expected others to recognize it. Shima moved between them, her chin lifted, refusing to hide. They conducted their business without incident. Purchasing supplies, exchanging greetings with people they knew. Some stares were hostile, others merely curious, but no one confronted them directly. When they finally rode back toward the ranch, Nash felt like they had won some small victory, claimed some piece of ground that could not be taken back. That night, Catherine raised her glass in a toast. "To stepping into the light," she said. "To stepping into the light." Nash and Shima echoed. Spring arrived in full, transforming the ranch, bringing new life and new possibilities. Nash and Shima planted a garden together, their hands side by side in the soil, planning for a future that no longer felt hypothetical. They talked about building an addition to the house, about expanding the herd, about all the ordinary dreams that people who love each other allow themselves to have. On a warm afternoon in April, as they worked together mending fence, Shima stopped suddenly and turned to Nash, her expression serious. "I need to tell you something," she said. Nash set down his tools, giving her his full attention. "All right, I have decided," Shima said carefully, "that I need to go back, not to stay, but to face them. To tell my father and Tarak that I am not coming home, that I have made my choice and I'm standing by it." Nash felt fear and pride war in his chest. "When?" he asked. "Soon," Shima said. "Before I lose my courage." "I will go with you," Nash said immediately. "I know," Shima replied, smiling. "I am counting on it." They made their preparations carefully, telling Catherine their plans, gathering what they would need for the journey. The night before they were set to leave, Nash could not sleep. He rose and found Shima already awake, sitting by the window. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted, but also ready. Nash sat beside her, taking her hand. "Whatever happens," he said, "we face it together." "Together," Shima agreed, and in that word was everything they had built, everything they had chosen, everything they hoped to become. The morning they left, Catherine embraced them both. "Be safe," she said, "and come home." "We will," Nash promised. They rode east toward the rising sun, toward confrontation and resolution, toward the future they had decided to claim. The journey would be hard, the conversation harder still, but they rode with purpose and with each other, and that made all the difference. Behind them, smoke rose from the ranch house chimney, a marker of home, a place to return to, a foundation upon which everything else could be built. And ahead the mountains waited, beautiful and indifferent, holding space for whatever came next. The Navajo village appeared like a memory made solid. Clusters of hogans arranged in patterns that spoke of generations, of families who had held this ground long before maps gave it different names. Smoke rose from cooking fires, children's voices carried on the wind, and somewhere a woman was singing, her voice threading through the afternoon like something woven from sunlight and sorrow. Nash and Shima had been writing for 3 days, following trails she remembered from childhood, paths that wound through canyon country where the rock itself seemed to hold stories in layers of red and gold. They had camped under stars so bright they hurt to look at, had talked through their fears and hopes until words gave way to the deeper communication of presence, of choosing again and again to move forward together. Now, sitting their horses at the edge of the village, Shima's hands trembled on the reins. Nash reached over and covered one of her hands with his own. "Steady and warm, you do not have to do this," he said quietly. "We can turn around right now." "No," Shima replied, her voice stronger than her hand suggested. "I have been running for months. It is time to stop. Time to stand still and let them see who I have become." A dog barked, then another. Children noticed them first, pointing and calling out. Within moments, people began emerging from hogans, faces turning toward the riders with expressions that ranged from shock to anger to something that might have been relief. An older woman, her hair streaked with silver, stopped dead in her tracks and brought both hands to her mouth. Shima dismounted slowly, her injured shoulder still stiff but healed. She stood tall, meeting the eyes of people she had known all her life, people who had taught her, raised her, loved her in the only ways they knew how. Nash dismounted beside her, but stayed a half step back, present but not presuming, letting this moment belong to her. A man pushed through the growing crowd, tall and weathered, with Shima's eyes and a face carved by disappointment and duty. Her father, Nash realized, and felt his own spine straighten instinctively, preparing for confrontation. "Shima," her father said, and the single word carried weight enough to crush stone. "You dare return here after what you have done?" "I return to speak truth," Shima replied, her voice carrying across the space between them, "to tell you that I am not coming back. That the life you chose for me is not the life I will live." The crowd murmured, scandalized and fascinated. Her father's jaw tightened. "You shame yourself," he said. "You shame your family. You shame the agreements made in good faith." "I shame no one by choosing freedom," Shima countered. "The shame belongs to those who would sell their daughter like livestock, who value alliances over her happiness." "Her life," a younger man stepped forward then, and Nash recognized him immediately from the confrontation at the ranch. Tarek, Shima's brother, looked leaner than before, harder, with eyes that burned with something between fury and pain. He stopped a few paces from Shima and stared at her as if she were a ghost he both wanted and feared to see. "You should have stayed gone," Tarek said, his voice low and dangerous. "Coming back changes nothing except how this ends." "How does this end, brother?" Shima asked, matching his intensity. "With you dragging me back in chains? With blood spilled because I wanted to choose my own path? Is that the ending you want written about our family?" Tarek flinched as if struck, but his expression remained hard. "You do not understand what you cost us," he said. "The alliance with the Bitsui family, the trade agreements, the protection they offered. All of it gone because you were too selfish to see beyond your own desires. And you do not understand what it costs to live without choice." Shima shot back. "To wake every day knowing your life belongs to someone else's plans. To feel your spirit dying by inches because no one will let you breathe." The words hung in the air like smoke. Impossible to ignore. Nash watched the crowd, saw some faces soften, saw others harden further. This was a moment balanced on a knife's edge, and anything could tip it toward violence or understanding. Shima's father spoke again, his voice heavy with controlled anger. "And who is this man? This white rancher who stands beside you? Do you think bringing him here proves something? That his presence validates your betrayal?" "His name is Nash Rollins," Shima said clearly. "He saved my life when I was shot and left to die. He took me into his home, asked nothing in return, protected me when he had every reason to turn me away. And yes, father, he stands beside me, not because I am property," he claims, "but because I choose to stand beside him." Her father's eyes narrowed, studying Nash with the kind of scrutiny that missed nothing. "You," he said, addressing Nash directly, "what do you want from my daughter?" Nash met his gaze without flinching. "I want her to be free," he said simply. "To make her own choices, live her own life. I want to stand beside her if she will have me, not as owner but as partner. And I want you to understand that she is not abandoning her people. She is claiming herself." Pretty words, Tarek spat. "But words are cheap. Actions tell the truth. And her actions say she values comfort over duty, white promises over family." "No," Shima said sharply, turning on her brother. "My actions say I value life over death, choice over chains, love over obligation. And if you cannot see the difference, then you have already lost something more important than any alliance." Tarek stepped closer, his hand moving toward the knife at his belt. Nash tensed, ready to intervene, but Shima held up a hand. "Stopping both men, please," she said, and her voice broke slightly, the armor of her anger cracking to reveal the pain beneath. "Please do not make this about violence." We have all lost enough already, the plea hung between them. Raw and honest, Tarak's hands stilled, trembling with the effort of restraint. His eyes filled with tears he refused to shed. You were supposed to be here, he said, his voice rough. You were supposed to stay. To be part of this family, part of this life. How am I supposed to accept that you chose strangers over blood? Because blood is not always family, Shima said gently, and family is not always blood. You are my brother, Tariq, and I love you. But I cannot love you more than I love myself. I cannot give you my life just because you expect it. Tarak stood frozen, the conflict playing across his face in waves. Then he did something unexpected. He turned to their father. His shoulders squared. She is right, he said. And the words seemed to cost him everything. The crowd gasped. Shima's father stared at his son as if he had grown a second head. What did you say? He demanded. I said she is right. Tarak repeated, louder this time. I shot her, father. I put an arrow in my own sister because you told me to bring her back at any cost. And I have been living with that for months. With the knowledge that I nearly killed her for the sake of your pride, and some elder's idea of duty. You dare question, her father began. But Tarak cut him off. Yes, I dare, Tarak said, his voice gaining strength. I dare question a system that values agreements over people, that treats daughters like currency, that makes brothers into hunters of their own blood. Shima is not property, and if we cannot see that, then we are the ones who should be ashamed. The silence that followed was profound, total. Even the children had stopped playing, sensing the weight of this moment. Shima stared at her brother with tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered. Their father looked between his children. Something crumbling behind his eyes, some wall built over decades beginning to crack. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, less certain. You truly will not return? He asked Shima. No, father, she said. But that does not mean I stop being your daughter. It just means I am your daughter on my own terms, living my own life. He closed his eyes, pain etching deep lines around his mouth. Then I have lost you, he said. Only if you choose to, Shima replied. I will be at the Rollins Ranch. You could visit, could see how I live, could know the woman I am becoming instead of mourning the girl I was. Her father opened his eyes and looked at her for a long moment. I do not know if I can do that, he admitted, but perhaps, in time. I will try. It was not forgiveness, not acceptance. But it was a door left open instead of slammed shut. And that was more than Shima had dared hope for. She nodded, acknowledging the fragile gift he offered. Thank you, father, an older woman. The one who had first stopped when they arrived, moved forward through the crowd. She came directly to Shima and pulled her into an embrace without hesitation. My niece, she said, her voice thick with emotion. We thought you were dead. Aunt Desba, Shima said, returning the embrace fiercely, nearly, but not quite. Desba pulled back and held Shima at arm's length, studying her face. You look different. She observed, stronger, more alive. I am, Shima agreed. Desba turned to Nash then, her sharp eyes missing nothing. And you are the rancher who saved her? I am, Nash said. She studied him the way someone studies a horse before purchase, looking for flaws and strengths in equal measure. Finally she nodded. You have kind eyes, she said. And my niece trusts you. That is enough for me. She turned back to the crowd. This man is a guest, she announced, and will be treated as such. Anyone who has a problem with that can speak to me. The authority in her voice was absolute. The crowd shifted, tension easing slightly. People began to disperse, some shooting curious glances back at Shima and Nash. Others shaking their heads in disapproval, but walking away nonetheless. Come, Desba said to Shima and Nash. You will eat with me, and you will tell me everything. They spent hours in Desba's hogan. Sharing a meal and stories, Nash sat quietly for most of it, letting Shima reconnect with her aunt. absorbing the warmth and laughter that flowed between the two women. Desba asked him questions occasionally, probing but not unkind, seeming to approve of what she found. As the afternoon stretched into evening, Desba spoke of Shima's mother, a woman who had died when Shima was young. She had your spirit. Desba told her niece, always questioning, always pushing against boundaries. Your father loved her desperately, but never quite understood her. I think that is why he tried so hard to control you, because he could not bear to lose another strong woman to the world's dangers. The words seemed to unlock something in Shima, an understanding of motivations that did not excuse, but at least explained. She wiped tears from her cheeks and squeezed her aunt's hand. I wish I had known her better, she said. She lives in you. Desba replied simply, in your courage, in your refusal to be less than you are. That is the greatest honor you can give her. When they finally prepared to leave, Desba walked them to their horses. She embraced Shima one more time, whispering something in their language that made Shima smile through tears. Then she turned to Nash. You take care of her, she said. And there was steel beneath the gentle words, not because she needs taking care of, but because that is what people who love each other do. I will, Nash promised, and she will take care of me. Good, Desba said. That is how it should be. She reached into a pouch at her waist and pulled out a small object wrapped in soft leather. Give this to your mother, she told Nash. Tell her it is from one woman who protects her home to another. Tell her we understand each other. Nash accepted the gift carefully, feeling the weight of acknowledgement it represented. I will tell her, he said. They mounted up and turned their horses west, toward the setting sun, toward home. As they rode away from the village, Shima looked back once, her hand lifted in farewell. Tarek stood watching from a distance, and after a moment, he raised his own hand in response. Beside him, their father stood rigid and silent, but he did not turn away. And that small mercy felt significant. That was harder than I expected. Shima said quietly as the village disappeared behind them. But you did it, Nash replied. You stood there and you spoke your truth. And you did not break. No, she agreed. I did not break. She was quiet for a moment, then added, Did you hear what my aunt whispered to me? No, what did she say? She said that love is not always where you expect to find it. But when you do find it, you hold on with everything you have. Shima turned to look at Nash, her eyes bright. She said you are a good man, and that I chose well. Nash felt warmth spread through his chest. Your aunt is wise. She is, Shima agreed. And she is right. They rode through the evening, making camp as full dark settled over the canyon. They built a small fire and sat close together, wrapped in blankets against the cooling air above them. Stars wheeled through their ancient paths. Indifferent and eternal, I keep thinking about Tarek. Shima said, staring into the flames, about how much courage it took for him to speak up. To go against our father, I never expected that. People surprise you, Nash observed, sometimes in good ways. I hope he finds his own freedom someday. Shima said, whatever that looks like for him. Maybe your example will help him see that it is possible, Nash suggested. Maybe, she agreed. Then turned to face him fully. Thank you for coming with me. For standing there even though it was not your fight. It was my fight, Nash said firmly. Anything that matters to you matters to me. Shima leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. When we get back, she said softly, I want to talk to your mother about building that addition to the house. About planting a bigger garden, about all the ways we can make this permanent. Nash pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I want that too, he said, all of it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire burn down to coals. Then Shima spoke again, her voice thoughtful. I used to think freedom meant being alone. She said, being beholden to no one, answerable only to myself. But I am learning that real freedom is choosing who you want to be connected to, Who you want to build a life with, that sounds right, Nash agreed. So I choose you, Shima said, turning to look at him. I choose this life we are building. I choose it every day. And I will keep choosing it for as long as you will have me. Nash cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears he had not realized were falling. I will have you for as long as forever lasts, he said, and longer if I can manage it. She laughed then, the sound bright and free, and kissed him with all the certainty of someone who had finally found their place in the world. The journey home took 3 more days. They rode through changing landscape, from Red Rock Canyon to Pine Forest to the high valley where the ranch waited. With each mile, Nash felt anticipation building, the pull of home stronger than he had ever experienced it. They talked about practical matters as they traveled. Where to build the addition, what crops to plant come spring, how to expand the operation to support a growing household. But beneath the practical conversations ran deeper currents, dreams they were allowing themselves to have, futures they were daring to imagine. On the second night, as they camped near a spring-fed creek, Shima asked Nash about his father, about the man whose legacy shaped so much of who Nash had become. He told her stories he had never shared with anyone, about lessons learned and mistakes forgiven, about the quiet ways his father had shown love when words failed him. He would have liked you, Nash said. He always respected people who knew their own minds, who stood firm when it mattered. I wish I could have met him, Shima replied. In a way, you have, Nash said. Every fence post he drove, every tree he planted, every choice he made that led to this ranch existing. All of that is still here, still part of what we are building on. The thought seemed to comfort Shima, giving her a sense of connection to the history of this place that would become her home. She fell asleep that night with Nash's arms around her, dreaming of roots growing deep and branches reaching wide. When the ranch finally came into view on the 3rd day, smoke rising from the chimney, Catherine visible on the porch as if she had been watching for them, Nash felt something settle in his chest, something that felt like completion. Like all the scattered pieces of his life had finally arranged themselves into a pattern that made sense. Catherine met them in the yard, pulling first Shima, then Nash into fierce embraces. You made it back, she said, relief evident despite her attempt to sound casual. We did, Shima confirmed, and it went better than I feared. Worse than I hoped, but we survived it. That is all that matters, Catherine said. Now come inside. I have stew on, and you both look half frozen. Inside, the house felt exactly right. Warm and welcoming, smelling of bread and coffee and home. They sat at the table, the same table where so much had already happened, and told Catherine everything. She listened without interrupting, her sharp eyes missing nothing, reading between the words to understand what was left unsaid. When Nash handed her the gift from Desba, Catherine unwrapped it carefully, revealing a small carved stone, smooth and dark. With symbols etched into its surface, she held it reverently, understanding immediately the significance of such a gift. Tell your aunt, Catherine said to Shima, that I am honored, and that she and her family will always be welcome at this table. Shima nodded, emotion tightening her throat. When they finished their story, Catherine was quiet for a long moment, then nodded decisively. All right, she said. Tomorrow we start planning that addition. And we need to order more seed for the garden. And Nash, you need to ride to town and file the papers to expand our land claim. Ma, Nash started, but Catherine held up a hand. This family is growing, she said firmly, and we need space for it to grow into. No arguments. Yes, ma'am, Nash and Shima said in unison, then looked at each other and laughed. That night, lying in bed in the room that had become hers, Shima stared at the ceiling and marveled at how much had changed. 6 months ago, she had been running for her life, wounded and terrified, with no idea where she would end up. Now she had a home, a family she had chosen and who had chosen her back, and a future that stretched ahead full of possibility. A soft knock came at her door. "Come in," she called. Nash entered. Closing the door quietly behind him, "Could not sleep?" he asked. "Too much to think about," Shima admitted. "Good thoughts or bad thoughts?" "Good ones," she said, smiling. "Scary good ones." Nash sat on the edge of the bed. Taking her hand, "Tell me, I am thinking about spring," Shima said. "About planting things and watching them grow. About building something that will last beyond us. About waking up every morning knowing I am exactly where I am supposed to be." "That sounds perfect," Nash said. "It does it not?" Shima agreed, then pulled him closer. "Stay with me tonight?" "Just to sleep. I just want to know you are near." "Always," Nash promised, and meant it with everything he had. He lay down beside her, and she curled into his warmth. Her head resting over his heart, they fell asleep like that. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds and chosen to build something real from the wreckage of what came before. Outside, winter loosened its grip day by day. The land prepared itself for spring, for renewal, for new growth. And inside the ranch house, three people slept soundly, secure in the knowledge that they had claimed their place in the world, that they had fought for what mattered and won. Morning came with golden light streaming through the windows. Nash woke first and lay still, not wanting to disturb Shima, but she stirred anyway, opening her eyes and smiling when she saw him watching her. "Good morning," she murmured. "Good morning," he replied. Kissing her forehead, they rose and dressed, moving through the morning rituals that were becoming familiar. Comfortable, when they emerged into the main room, Catherine already had breakfast cooking, the smell of bacon and eggs filling the house. She looked at them and smiled, a rare expression of pure contentment crossing her usually guarded features. The story was not over, would never truly be over. Because life does not work that way. There would be hard days ahead, challenges to face, moments of doubt and fear. But there would also be joy, laughter, the ordinary miracles of daily life shared with people you love. And in the end, that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.
Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.